and we'll just leave it at that. That'll be the recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Audrey, are
We
you
can cut.
recording
Yeah.
to your computer
Uh,
or to the cloud?
to my computer.
Okay. I am also recording and it's going to go to our cloud because that'll allow us to like easy for the link.
Cool. Redundancy is great. And
Yeah.
then Cam, you'll be on PowerPoint duty, which means I will be on chat duty.
Okay.
Okay, do we want to start admitting?
Uh,
Let's just give
yeah.
it, let's just wait the minute. Something might come
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. We have 21 participants. Excited about that. Boo, boo, boo.
Oh, and Hoken, I don't know if you saw, but Brian registered as well.
I saw some of our longtime CBG supporters are going to be here as well, including
Yeah.
Bennett Ramberg, who's
Yeah.
something of a notable name in the non-proliferation space.
That's
Also
amazing.
Janice.
Janice, yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
Nice
Good
work, y'all.
turnout.
I know.
80 RSVPs and 20 people already showing up early. Great work,
Yeah.
all. Yeah. Should be really, really proud of yourselves. Hey, whenever we're ready, I can start admitting people, or I'm happy to wait. Oh, it's time. Okay, I'm gonna admit everyone and we'll get going.
Here we go.
Okay.
Hello, everyone that is joining and getting settled in. Welcome, welcome to our webinar. We're going to give it about another minute or two as we admit people coming in. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to have you all. I know we have people from across the nation here, so thank you those who are joining at 8:30 at night, and thank you those who are joining right after work at 5:30. We're really excited to have you all. To kick us off, you should have chat capabilities. Why don't you let us know your name, location, how you heard about the event? And the question I've been asking everyone as the start of summer kicks off is, what is your favorite vegetable? So go ahead and drop that in the chat and we'll continue to drop that in. And we just want to get to know who's joining us today.
Yeah, hi. This is Dory Rafton.
Oh,
I
hi,
can't
Dory.
put my chat, so
Okay.
and I'm from San Fernando Valley, busy with Rocketine cleanup.
Good to see you, Dory.
Nice. We got a spinach. Ooh, I love an asparagus. Wow. Hi, welcome all.
Hey, hey, all. We're just giving it a couple minutes as we get some more people coming in. In the chat, if you can, let us know your name, location, how you heard about the event, and what your favorite vegetable is. I love a good Brussels sprout. I
Yeah,
had, yeah, I had a deep fried Brussels sprout lunch for today, and it was amazing.
so good.
Fresh peas, Tilly. I'm on the same boat. My peas are still kicking, and I feel so grateful that I still have peas in July. Unheard of.
Wow, this is great, everyone. We're coming from all over the country. I was not expecting quite the spread, so thank you for being here.
All right, team. Would you like me to kick it off and I'll keep admitting people as we go? Let's do it. We'll be conscious of everyone's time. Thank you all for being here. We want to start to let you know that we are recording. If you have any issues with that, you can turn off your screen. If you're still concerned, you can drop off and we will send you the recording later. We will be sending that out once it's updated to all those that registered. But to help create a respectful and productive discussion tonight, we do ask that you please remain muted unless we ask, but to use the chat feature for questions and comments. We don't have the Q&A, so just put it in the chat. We will be moderating that. And then we also ask that all participants treat our speakers and fellow attendees with courtesy and allowing our presenters to finish presenting before asking questions and engaging in respectful dialogue, even when our opinions may differ. Disruptive, offensive, or disrespectful behavior will result in removal from the meeting, so we want to make sure you're able to hang out with us all night. And we want to ensure this is a welcoming environment for everyone. And to let you know, we will stop recording before the Q&A, which again, we'll be using the chat feature today. So with our admin out of the way, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Carmen Valdez. I have a bachelor's in political science, a master's in international affairs, and countless hours of research and certificates that focus on radiation and public health impacts. And that helps my work as a senior policy associate with Heal Utah. I see a few people from Utah here. We are proud to partner with Committee to Bridge the Gap, as well as all the other organizations for this amazing webinar today from across the country. And we really wanted to kick it off before we hand over to our speakers, highlighting that many of us, and especially those in Utah and in the Southwest, know firsthand the impacts of radiation exposure that can last for generations in our communities. Our state has a long history of radioactive contamination tied to nuclear development, and communities continue to reckon with that legacy of uranium mining, nuclear weapons testing, and radioactive waste. As an example, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act exists because Utah residents refuse to let these harms be ignored. Downwinders, uranium workers, tribal communities, and advocates spent decades documenting cancer clusters, sharing their stories, and pushing Congress to recognizing the devastating health impacts of radiation exposure when done improperly. The recent expansion of RECA to include all of Utah and many other communities that were not previously covered reflects the growing scientific evidence linking these exposures to serious illnesses and acknowledges that many affected communities were left out of the original law, and we are all downwinders. Those experiences are exactly why this moment today matters. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is considering sweeping changes to the regulations that govern how nuclear fallout facilities are licensed, operated, overseen, and how radiation impacts our communities. These decisions could shape public health protections, environmental oversight, radiation standards, and opportunities for community participation for decades to come. Public comments are one of the few formal ways in which communities can influence federal decision-making process, whether you're directly impacted, work in your community, or simply care about protecting public health in future generations. We sure hope so. Your voice helps create a public record that regulators are required to consider. Strong public participation also reminds decision makers that communities expect transparency, accountability, and meaningful oversight, not weaker protections. We also believe that everyone deserves access to accurate information, meaningful opportunities to participate in decisions about radioactive materials and facilities, and strong protections for public health and the environment. And our speakers are going to dive into why we believe that. We thank you all for joining us today, learning more about these proposed changes, taking the time to speak up for your communities. And I'm so excited to pass it off to our amazing speakers today who have spent so much time putting this together and helping make sure we get you all the right information you need for your communities. So let's go ahead and kick it off over to Håkan.
Great. Thank you so much, Carmen. Hello, everyone. My name is Håkan Williams. I'm the Executive Director of Committee to Bridge the Gap, a nuclear policy watchdog that has been around since 1970, working very hard to clean up and prevent the toxic messes left by the nuclear industry. I'm joined here tonight by a few others from the Committee to Bridge the Gap staff, We have Audrey Ford here on the line, as well as Cameron Kuda. So thank you all for being here. Gonna go into a presentation on some of what we're seeing, both in terms of the context um, that is happening on nuclear issues currently, as well as specifics of the NRC's new proposed weakening of radiation protection standards. There is going to be a moment for Q&A. There is going to be a moment to tell you about our new coalition and its campaign to defend radiation protection standards at the NRC. So, and we'll do a workshop on writing comments at the end. So stick around, got a lot of good stuff, and there will be a chance to have a dialogue. With that, next slide, please. So radiation, just a few basics. We are talking here about radioactive isotopes that variously emit gamma radiation, beta radiation, alpha radiation. In simple, radiation causes damage to DNA, causes damage to cells. It can cause cancer. In high doses, it leads to death very quickly, but in low doses, indeed, to the very lowest doses, causes some risk of health harms. Those health harms include not only cancer, but a broad variety of systemic impacts to health. And again, the prevailing and still very strongly accepted for decades now across every scientific institution that's looked at this model of low-dose radiation harm, linear, no threshold, continues to hold that, again, even to the smallest doses, radiation exposure causes some risk of health harms. All of this makes radiation a very difficult pollutant to deal with, as those of us who have in various ways, many here on this call tonight, dealt with radiation would know. It has no smell, it has no taste, you cannot see radiation, and yet it lasts for a very long time, depending on the isotopes. We're talking about tens of thousands of years, millions of years. Next slide, please. So the nuclear industry so far, which has been in operation for the better part of a century, has left a vast legacy of radioactive contamination. We're certainly not just talking about medical x-rays here. We're talking about fallout from weapons testing, nuclear reactor accidents across the globe, improper waste disposal practices. My own organization has been involved over the years in trying to get toxic sites, including the Santa Susana Field Lab, the Hunters Point Shipyard, cleaned up and preventing dump sites that the nuclear industry wanted to put radioactive waste into, such as Ward Valley, which would have contaminated the Colorado River for countless generations with radionuclides, including tritium. What are other sources of radioactive pollution? Routine releases from reactors, which do emit, even in the absence of any accident or catastrophe, some significant amount of radiation. In fact, a new study out just earlier this year from the Harvard School of Public Health has now shown that there is an association between living close to a nuclear reactor and higher levels of cancer mortality. Another major concern here is the spent nuclear fuel that is produced by nuclear reactors, currently piling up across the nation with no solution in sight for what to do with it. This spent nuclear fuel is intensely radioactive, and given the immensely long timescales we're talking about, the 500,000 years over which that spent fuel will remain radioactive, this is a potential source of radioactive contamination our species needs to be thinking about as well. And yet, we are facing, as many of you will have heard, a proposed expansion of the nuclear industry and industrial operations. Among other developments, the president would now like our country to build 4 times more nuclear energy capacity than we currently have, from 100 gigawatts to 400 gigawatts, an expansion of domestic uranium fuel supplies. Our country is currently in the midst of a update of our nuclear weapons stockpile, estimated to cost somewhere in the range of $2 trillion. Our country has elected to well, not elected, rather, but we are giving away plutonium to nuclear reactor startups. And whatever one might think about these developments, whether or not one thinks they are wise and should happen, we should all be concerned that it's happening at the same time as the most severe deregulation at the country's nuclear regulator, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Among other developments there, hundreds of staff have been lost from the agency. The agency has been subjected to intense political pressures from the top. The rubber stamp quote you see on the page here is a direct quote from a top Doge official last year indicating what NRC is expected to do now. And the NRC is also now conducting, under some executive orders issued by President Trump last year, a revision of 100% of its regulations. Next slide, please. Here's some text from one of those executive orders. We've highlighted here the relevant passage that the NRC shall undertake a review and wholesale revision of its regulations and guidance documents, not a targeted, considered updating, but a wholesale revision at a time when there's immense political pressure on the NRC, indeed a change in its mission statement to no longer just care about safety, but indeed to act as a promoter of the nuclear industry. I want to just really quickly as well acknowledge that in our view, this is really, or in my view anyhow, a perfect storm when we have not only the proposed expansion of nuclear industrial operations and the deregulation of nuclear regulations, but also a generational gap where many of the nuclear safety watchdogs who have for decades acted to protect the public from radiation are aging out. Some of them are still with us and we're very grateful. Some of them are here on this call. But I want to acknowledge that this call has really been intended a lot to start to call in a new, younger generation of nuclear safety advocates and watchdogs. So to the younger folks who are here tonight, well, to all of you, thank you for being here, but especially to the younger folks, really glad to have you here. Next slide, please. There is a long history of underestimating the risk from radiation. Here is a dramatic but true photo of the radiation-damaged hands of the X-ray assistant to pioneering radiation scientist Röntgen. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. To take one pivotal example of radiation risk estimates increasing over time. In other words, the more study of radiation we do, the more dangerous we understand it to be. This is a table from BEER 5. BEER is one of the most fundamental series of reports on the risks of low-dose radiation from the National Academies of Science. When the National Academy updated its report from BEER 3 to BEER 5, low-dose radiation was shown to be somewhere on the range of 3 to 18 times more risky in terms of how much cancer it's understood to produce than before. The most current estimates in BEER 7 have further increased those cancer risk estimates by 35%. Next slide, please. Indeed, the most recent science continues to underscore that radiation exposure is riskier than we previously thought. Large, high-quality studies like the INWORK study of nuclear workers, the EPI-CT study of CAT scans has confirmed that indeed in the low-dose risk range, there are significant cancer risks. Let's go to the next slide. And yet our regulations already, even before the NRC proposed weakening of radiation standards, were already far too weak. The public limits are 35 years old. Worker limits were set 2/3 of a century ago. The NRC for decades has already understood that its radiation limits are non-protective relative to what's known scientifically. When BEER 7, in finalizing the current regulations, NRC noted that BEER 5, which had come out after its last update to radiation regulations, BEER 5 had found higher risks from radiation than were previously understood, but the NRC at that time specifically declined to tighten the permissible exposures. So thus, even decades ago, NRC has conceded that its radiation limits produced cancer hazards higher than standard allowable risks. So the situation was already non-protective in terms of the public and worker radiation limits. It's now getting immeasurably worse. Next slide, please. Here again, just to underscore this a little bit more, the current worker dose limit is 5,000 millirem, 5 rem a year. This is equivalent to if a worker is exposed at the legally permissible limit every day they work, that's equivalent to 10 chest x-rays a day, which according to the National Academy of Sciences risk factors, that would result in an excess cancer rate of 1 in 5 people getting cancer that they would not otherwise have gotten. Next slide, please. So one of our core messages is indeed the NRC's radiation limits should be changed. They should be tightened, not weakened. Next slide. But this is not what is currently happening under the executive order from President Trump, asserting that the NRC's safety models lack sound scientific basis and produce irrational results. Although you notice in the first sentence, it does accurately characterize the existing model of low-dose radiation exposure, which is there is no safe threshold. Harm is directly proportional to the amount of exposure. Contrary to the president's order, those models do have sound scientific basis. Next slide, please. I think we've already pretty much gone over linear no threshold. Even a small amount of radiation causes some small but increased risk of cancer. Risk goes up linear with dose. More radiation, more risk of health harms. The president also had in mind a LARA, the as low as reasonably achievable standard, to make every reasonable effort to maintain exposures to radiation as far below the dose limits, in this case, as is practical. Because again, if any amount of radiation causes some amount of health risk, then we should want to minimize radiation everywhere we can. Next slide, please. The NRC already 5 years ago, now 2021, rejected an attempt to raise radiation limits, strongly reaffirming the existing radiation limits at that time. But now, under political pressure from the top, the NRC is reopening and reconsidering its, indeed proposing to weaken its radiation limits. Next slide, please. So here are some of the details we're seeing in the NRC's new proposed radiation limits. These just came out last week. We're still analyzing them, but what is clear so far is that the as low as reasonably achievable goal is being removed completely. So that will cease to be a governing goal for radiation exposure. Effluent from nuclear facilities will be, limits for radioactivity will be allowed to be 10 times higher. Workers will be allowed to be exposed to 2 times higher. So whereas the current limit is 5 rem per year, they would be allowed to be exposed up to 10 rem. And for the public, the NRC wants you to think that the public dose limit is staying the same at 100 millirem, which, as you'll remember, was already too weak. That's not quite accurate because the NRC is also removing the upper limit on the exemptions that the industry may apply to from these limits. Thus, if this rule goes through, the situation will be that the industry may apply for, and the NRC may, at its discretion, grant alternative public dose limits that have effectively no upper bound on how high they can be. Next slide, please. I think that's it from me. Going to turn it over to Dr. Amanda Nichols.
Thanks so much, Hoken, and I am just going to share my screen here with you all. Perfect. All right, you can see that? Good, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks again, Carmen, and thanks, Hoken, and thank you to all of you for being here this evening. My name is Dr. Amanda Nichols, and I am an independent researcher and nuclear radiation policy specialist at Generational Radiation Impact Project, which is an NGO that's based in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm here primarily today to discuss with you the disproportionate impacts of radiation and to give you an overview of some of the public health consequences associated with the NRC's rulemaking and the weakening of radiation protection standards in the United States. I want to start today by saying again clearly that there is no safe level of radiation exposure. All exposures carry the risk of harm, which can express in the form of both cancer and non-cancer related health impacts. These impacts can manifest at any point in the life cycle after an exposure takes place, and it sometimes takes years or even decades before those negative health consequences appear. For decades, exposure to ionizing radiation has been understood as having a uniform effect on exposed populations. But in the 2006 National Academy of Sciences report BEER 7, which Håkan was mentioning, they provided data that revealed that the effects are not uniform and that women and children suffer disproportionate harm from ionizing radiation exposure. Nevertheless, radiation protection guidelines in the United States have continued to rely on an outdated model, which is called reference man. The reference man model was established in 1974 by the International Commission for Radiological Protection as a standard for evaluating compliance with nuclear licenses and with gauging the impacts of releases on the general population. Reference man is based on the average male nuclear industry worker. It's built around a formula which says that he is between 20 and 30 years old. He weighs approximately 150 pounds. He's 5 feet 5 inches tall, and he lives in a North American or Western European climate. This model primarily focuses on on external exposures only, so it does not account for real-world internal exposures such as those that come from breathing contaminated air or ingesting contaminated water and food. The radiation models, such as Reference Man, which represent radiation impacts to human health via an all-male population model or of near same age workers, are not representative of the majority of the population in the US. This model excludes most men. It cannot accurately represent radiological harms to children who are more susceptible to harm, and it does not factor in the disproportionate impacts of radiological harm to women. The current US protection guidelines rely on this model, which means that they are already insufficient in terms of offering adequate protection for the vast majority of the population. Now, with this new rule, the NRC plans to further weaken protection standards. This means less protection for industry workers and for the general public, and that the risk of negative health outcomes for everyone is going to be much higher. This graph presents a summary of the findings from the 2006 BEER 7 report. The data from this report, on which the graph is based, comes from the lifespan study of atomic bomb survivors in Hiroshima and Nagasaki that was started in 1950. Each bar in this graph shows the rate of cancer incidence per 100,000 people, and it's been adjusted to a scenario where everyone got the same amount of radiation in order to more clearly see age and biological sex as factors. So the orange bars in this graph represent females and the blue bars represent males. At the bottom of this screen, you can see the age that the survivors were in 1945, with those who were infants at the time grouped on the left and the elders grouped on the right. Each age cohort in this graph was tracked across their lifetime for 60 years, and the cancer incidents were recorded and counted for each group. So it's really easy to see from this graph that females suffered more cancer than males in every age group, and that the difference is greatest when the exposure happened in childhood. In 2024, Mary Olson and I co-authored the report Gender and Ionizing Radiation, which was published with the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. This report asked whether there was additional research since that 2006 BEER 7 report that shows disproportionate impacts to girls and women from radiation exposure. Through our non-exhaustive study, we found an additional sample of radiation research that provides substantial evidence that corroborates the findings from the previous report and that shows disproportionate impacts to girls and women in both cancer and non-cancer related health outcomes. Our key findings from that study included evidence that radiation exposure causes more cancer, heart disease, and stroke in women compared to men, but the impacts go well beyond this. There are also immune system dysfunctions, pregnancy impacts, and other health effects that have all been linked to radiation exposure, and they affect some populations more than others. We now know that age at time of exposure is an independent factor in assessing radiation outcomes, meaning that those who are exposed as children are more at risk of developing cancer at some point over the course of their lifetime. We also know that little girls, when they are exposed early between birth and 5 years old, are the most at risk over the course of their lifetime for developing both cancer and non-cancer related health consequences. This information is really critical for us to consider because we're not just talking about the possibility of new exposures with this rulemaking. Instead, what we're talking about is adding additional radioactive pollution into an already contaminated environment, thus creating the risk of multiple or compounding exposures and an exponentially greater chance of harm. In 2023, the New York Times broke the story on a new study from Princeton University, led by researcher Sebastian Philippe. This study documents how radioactive fallout from nuclear weapons testing has been dispersed across the United States, leaving a legacy of radioactive pollution in our environment, including in our soil and groundwater. The map shows the radioactive fallout from all of the atomic bomb tests that have taken place in the US, beginning with the Trinity test in New Mexico in 1945. You can see on the scale here at the bottom that white represents regions with zero radioactive fallout, and that purple and black represent the most fallout. We can see clearly here that there is no place in the contiguous US that has been unaffected. We can also see clearly which regions have been the most impacted and where radioactive fallout from weapons testing has left a lasting legacy of radioactive pollution in the environment. This kind of pollution, which will remain in the land for generations to come, causes what environmental historian Rob Nixon and others have called slow radiological violence. Violence that causes harm gradually over years and even decades because it is out of sight, ignored, or even intentionally erased from the conversation. And it's not just fallout from nuclear weapons testing. There is also radioactive environmental contamination from the operational nuclear power reactors in the US, which you can see here, and all of the other nuclear sites, including mines and reprocessing facilities that are not pictured here. As Håkan mentioned, a study by Al-Wadi et al. Published earlier this year by Harvard's Chan School of Public Health found elevated cancer mortality rates among Americans living within 125 miles of existing nuclear plants like the ones pictured here. Moreover, research by Marco Kaltofen and Phil Plato in 2024 has also demonstrated that internal exposures, which come from ingesting contaminated food, water, or air, are orders of magnitude more harmful than we have previously been led to believe. It's important for me to emphasize two important points here. First, multiple exposures do not just mean that the risk of harm doubles. It is not a 1 + 1 = 2 model. Multiple exposures means compounding harm, and the more exposures a person has, the more likely they are to suffer the risk of negative health consequences. This risk is also higher when those exposures happen closer together or in quick succession. So this is why the proposed change to worker dose limits in particular are so problematic. Not only is the NRC planning to double the allowable dose that any worker can get in a year, but they suggest that if the full amount of exposure from year 1 is not used, it can simply be rolled over to the following year, allowing for more exposure in quick succession in year 2. This matters for all industry workers who encounter radiation in their jobs, not just those working in the nuclear industry. This change will directly impact workers in other fields, for instance, including dental and medical workers. These are people we know. They're our friends and our family members, and maybe some of you who are being put at greater risk with this new rulemaking. Second, it's also important for me to mention the compounding impacts of communities who have already borne the brunt of our radioactive legacies in the United States. This includes the numerous indigenous communities and other marginalized groups across the US that have historically been targeted by the nuclear industry for mining, waste storage, and nuclear power facilities that have already experienced high levels of radioactive contamination and harm from exposure. These communities are even more at risk from this new rulemaking, which will raise the likelihood of additional compounding exposures for people who live there. This data has important implications as well when we think about the impacts of radiation on the human species and on our future generations of children and grandchildren. Our species, like others, is a cycle that repeats itself through time, forming our generations. Each life stage depends on and emerges from all of the others. There is a tacit idea that reproductive cells only come into play with pregnancy, but that is simply not true. Reproductive cells are present at every age, and up until the end of the fertile phase, impacts to these cells may impact cells in future generations. We cannot therefore continue to look at an adult-only population model. If we want to fully understand the ways that radiation impacts us and the future of our species, we need to create a life cycle model. Intergenerational and intersectional harms are explicit in radiation exposure data. Yet despite this evidence, these harms have not been widely addressed or discussed in the context of exposure at different life stages. What this data shows us is that we need a more nuanced understanding of the life cycle impacts and the cross-generational effects of radiological harm. Such an approach is necessary for us to better understand the disproportionate impacts and the public health consequences of radiation exposure, as well as the long-term intergenerational impacts of radioactive pollution that already exist within our environment. Should this NRC rulemaking move forward, it will also open the door for other real-world effects that will directly impact communities and people like you. These impacts may include a dramatic increase in the radioactive releases from nuclear power plants and higher levels of radioactive environmental pollution in our air, food, and water, higher levels of radioactivity permissible in product, the authorization of high-level waste repositories, even if projected radioactive seepage far exceeds the current allowable limits, and a cessation of any efforts to clean up sites that are already contaminated. It is critical that we all better understand the public health consequences of this proposed rule. If we do, it will help us to better understand the differentiated health consequences of radiation exposure. It also helps to underscore that there is no safe level of exposure and that there is a critical need for a more nuanced understanding of compounding forms of harm. It can also help us to recenter the conversation around those who experience harm from exposure, including radiation survivors of all ages and affected communities. Moreover, this information bolsters the rationale for better protections for everyone based on long-term, compounding, intersectional, and intergenerational health consequences of ionizing radiation. And it reinforces the need for advocacy for stronger commitments to risk reduction and the need for widespread public response during the open comment period. Just to briefly reiterate what we already know, we know for sure that there is no safe level of exposure. All exposures carry risk of negative health consequences. We know that biological sex and age at time of exposure are independent and compounding factors in radiation harm. And we also know that radiation outcomes are not uniform despite the same level of exposure. Because of all this knowledge, we know that radiological protection guidelines must be strengthened. If we protect those who are most at risk, then we will be able to protect everyone better. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Can we get our slides back up? Great. So, real quick, want to just mention our coalition that's organizing this webinar tonight and doing a whole lot of other work to oppose the deregulation at the NRC. Um, on the screen here, you see the name of our campaign, Protect Better. As you've heard, existing radiation protection standards were already too weak, being too high, not up to date with even decades old science, not accounting for non cancer harms, not accounting for disproportionate impacts to girls and women. So we need to protect better, not loosen standards. And that's exactly what our coalition is working to do. On screen, you'll see the logos of some of the key organizations who've been uh, launching this campaign. If anyone's on the call here today is interested in possibly joining our coalition, we are open to new member organizations. You can get in touch with any of us you're hearing speak tonight to learn more about that. And you can use the QR code there, whether or not you're interested in joining the coalition. If you go to that QR code or simply the website protectbetter.org, you'll find a lot more information about our coalition. You'll be able to join our email list. We'll update you on how to submit comment to the NRC and all manner of other ways to protect better when it comes to radiation. Next slide, please. So hopefully, maybe some of you are wondering, well, how can I help? One major way that we're asking for help right now is to get people to write comments to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The NRC released its proposed rule last week, so it's out. We can read it. The comment period is not open just yet. The NRC is delaying that. We're expecting it to be open within the next week, though. Now, if you were anything like me, maybe at times you've wondered, why does it matter if I submit a comment? I'm just one voice among many. I did want to speak to that real quick because those of us who are working closely on this really do want to get as many comments as possible submitted to the NRC. Um, for starters, it matters to have a show of force. And to tell you why specific to this rulemaking, actually, we're seeing signals in the NRC's proposed rule that the final rule that it issues in December may be worse than its proposed rule, and that NRC may be trying to get people to submit comments in favor of weakening radiation protections, and to then use those comments as sort of an excuse to finalize a radiation rule that's even weaker than what's been proposed now. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen. We need to get a lot of conscientious, informed folks to clearly tell the NRC that we need to protect people better and have stronger, not weaker, radiation protection standards. A couple other points I would make, hopefully inspiring you to take the time to submit even a short comment. One, it really does help lay the groundwork for any potential legal challenge that may come out of this. Any potential future lawsuits are limited to the material submitted during the public comment period. So it's really important to have every conceivable point and bit of evidence and science and data that we would want submitted to the NRC now. And last, maybe some of the more cynical among you don't believe it. I know at times I haven't, but we've also seen in our work at Committee to Bridge the Gap that some of the people in these agencies are not entirely beholden to directives from above. They are in a position to help direct the course of affairs in a more positive or negative direction, and their hearts can be reached and melted. We've had a number of instances of agency officials using their weight and influence to do the right thing, and telling your story and being a compelling commenter to the NRC can have that effect. Um, Next
Also,
slide.
Hoken, if I can just add to that really quickly, one thing that comes up often in our experience with these comment writing periods is people who feel either insecure or people who feel like the fact that they don't necessarily have a technical background in these issues means that they can't comment effectively. And, I think I can speak for everyone in our sector when we say that, um, all comments are effective, and also particularly comments where what you're sharing is just your own story. So you are the expert on your own experience. So in that context, you are an expert. And even if it is something as, direct as I care about this objectively, or I have a personal connection to these issues, or I live somewhere that is affected, whatever your personal experience may be, the sad fact, and for us in this case, I guess the, beneficial fact is that no matter where you are or your experiences up until now, we are all touched and affected by this. So no need to list whatever facts or anything like that. Oftentimes, what does end up melting the hearts, as Hoken said, is, your personal accounts just as a concerned individual. Um, and I also just wanted to say that exactly, Carmen. Yeah, we are all downwinders. We are all experts. We've posted in the chat the links to the various orgs that have been primarily behind this webinar. I will be compiling all of the links that have been posted in the chat and along with the slides. Those will be made available. So if you have missed some of them, no worries. You'll have access to those. If you are seeing them now, feel free to record them. Um, yeah, there you go. Continue on, Hoki.
Thank you, Audrey. So I am realizing before we continue on into talking more about public comments to the NRC, we did want to take a pause and open it up to any potential questions that some of you may have. Carmen, am I throwing it back to you to moderate a little Q&A?
Yeah, I'm happy to moderate a little Q&A. I want some of our facilitators, if possible, to pause your recording.
Our concern with the NRC's proposed weakening of radiation regulations and allowing higher exposures across the entire American continent, to take a moment right now to write a comment that you can submit to the agency. So as we come into the last 20 minutes of our webinar here, that is what we're gonna do. So on the screen, many of you have probably written comments before. It's not rocket science, unlike a lot of these polluting facilities we're talking about. Again, emphasizing that the comments should be unique. You don't need to be an expert. In fact, it's important to make clear in the comments your particular background, your particular story, and why it matters to not increase radiation levels for you. So on the right, you'll see a good structure for a comment. Introduce yourself, why it's important to you and your community, stating your position on radiation protection standards, explaining some of the reasoning. Can we go to the next slide, please? So if you're still here with us, which thank you if you are, we're glad to have you here. I'm going to encourage you to get on your computer, on your phone, open up a Word document, a note in your phone, a Google Doc, and jot a few notes down. Again, it really doesn't have to be the most involved comment in the world. What matters is we get a lot of comments in to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So to get the juices flowing a little bit, I wanted to invite folks to just kind of brainstorm maybe in the chat. We've already heard a lot of this, but if you want to just pop in the chat, a quick the thought you're having in terms of what's top of mind for you when you think about a potential increase in allowable radiation exposures. Is that you live near a nuclear facility and you're concerned about increased radioactive emissions from that facility? Is it maybe you're worried about the impacts on the disproportionate impacts on women or children in your life. Maybe you're worried about the consumer goods supply. We haven't talked much about that, but there are limits on the amount of radiation allowed in metal items, for instance. My organization, Committee to Bridge the Gap, some years ago, uh, watchdogged the Boeing Corporation, dismantling radioactive buildings from the Santa Susana Field Lab and sending radioactive metal to metal recyclers to be made into zippers, belt buckles, glasses. Um, what are some other things that people have in mind in terms of how this rulemaking could impact you? Pop it in the chat. Help us understand the possible broad implications of this weakening. So we're just going to take a quiet minute or two here, give you all a chance to jot down a few sentences about why you want the NRC to strengthen, not weaken, radioactive protections. So we'll be here. We'll continue the conversation until the hour. Please go ahead and pop stuff in the chat. Let's leave ourselves on mute so we can give everyone some quiet time to write a little comment. All right, gonna give it another minute or two. Give everyone a chance to just go ahead and get it done. Write this comment, get it ready to submit. If you have questions about, again, your comment doesn't need to be really involved, but if you do have questions, I know some folks are in the chat. Go ahead and pop your question into the chat and we will get it answered.
We have a couple questions about general deadline. Do we want to just reiterate what's going on at the moment with the kind of a little bit wishy-washy deadline for end of comments?
Yeah. So to reiterate, the NRC's proposed rule is actually already out. There's a link in the chat if you'd like to pull up the 180-page proposed rule, although I don't want to be too daunting. The actual substance of the rule is a mere 50 or 60 pages. So that is out. However, the comment period has not yet opened officially. It will open when the NRC's proposed rule hits the Federal Register. We initially thought it would be open now, but we now are expecting that to be within the next week or so. Um, if you were here tonight, we have your email address. We'll uh, reach out with a reminder email to let you know we are watching the Federal Register, so you don't have to. We'll email you when it's open and give you the link and all the information at that time for exactly where to go to submit your comment. The public comment period will be 45 days. So thus we expect it to run sometime into the middle or second half of August. And as Connie notes in the chat, there will be a public meeting at some point during the comment period. So you'll be getting information about that too. Um, Amanda, did you want to add something? I see Catherine has a question too.
Yeah, there was an email circulated earlier today where we have some of the information about those public meetings that are going to be taking place. Most of those are happening next week from the 13th through the 16th. So we can get that information out to you all as well, if that's helpful.
Thanks, Amanda. Catherine?
If I'm misunderstanding, correct me, but when you open the rule, if you go to it, that's already published, the first page, you see a disclaimer that says that this is not the final version, that they reserve the option of making changes. That's not their language, but essentially they say that it can be different when it's actually published. It's not likely to be greatly different, but it's not 100% what they're going to be publishing until it appears in the docket as a published rule. So just keep that in mind.
And that published rule, from my understanding, is not due out until the end of this year. So this is a draft, and it is, as I said in the chat earlier, it is likely to change at least somewhat. And we don't yet know what exactly is going to be in the final rule. So that's why it's so important to get your comments in and to let them know what you're thinking about and why you're concerned about this rulemaking as it is.
And additional reminder, we will email you all once that public comment opens up. So if you RSVP'd for this event, we have your email. And so we will email you with action alerts, links, sample language, everything you need to submit those comments. So you don't have to be checking every single day like the rest of us are. We've been watching this since February, y'all, January. So please just be patient with us while we're patient with the federal government. I think we all feel that deep in our souls. So please review over those, work on your comments in the time being, and also contact other people in your communities, in your neighborhoods, in your states, and get them to comment. And it is not reserved to any one state, and people from around the world can also comment as well. So please make sure you get those comments, and you will be seeing emails from us in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Carmen. And I wanted to just bring everyone's attention to Kathy has put a comment into the chat that I think is a great example for everyone if you're not sure what a comment should look like. It's short, it's, it's to the point, but it's, gives Kathy's perspective on some of what the NRC needs to be paying attention to in radiation regulation. Kathy, the only note I would give for you on your comment is to maybe start or end it with a clear statement about how the NRC's radiation regulations should be strengthened, not weakened. That's what I would suggest. Obviously, put it in your own words, but be directive to the NRC. Remember, this is theoretically your federal agency, supposed to be protecting you and your community. So tell them what to do. As we're coming into the last few minutes of the webinar here, um, going a little bit off script, but I want to just open it up. If there's anyone else on the call here who's been involved in the coalition, in the Protect Better campaign, um, again, it's you've heard tonight from myself, from Amanda at Generational Radiation Impact Project, from Carmen at Heal Utah, but there are a bunch of other orgs involved in this campaign as well. Um, did any of you folks, Cindy, I know is here. Is there anything we missed or that you really want to emphasize to the folks who are gathered here?
This is Cindy from Beyond Nuclear. Hello, everyone. Nothing that I can think of offhand, except just to say that this is kind of at this point a moving target. The document that the NRC released to the public, but not yet in the Federal Register, is a bit of a hot mess. Diane DeRigo, if she were here, would tell you to start with page 120 reading, because everything before then is kind of difficult. I went ahead and read the whole thing, and am still, it's as clear as mud, some of the stuff that they're saying. So just be aware that it seems like, surprise, surprise, they don't necessarily know what they're doing. And so I think a lot of the commenting, while we want it to be driven by what's in this document, a lot of the commenting should also be driven by our personal lived experiences and what we know about ourselves and our communities. Because that's stuff that's not going to be in any federal document unless we put it there. And this is going to be part of the federal record for this particular rulemaking. And it's really important that that gets on some sort of official record. So that's kind of what I have to say. Thanks. Thanks for this. This is a great webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy. Catherine, I saw you raise your hand, but have since put it down. Did you have anything to say or?
No, I was looking for a thumbs up and I hit the
Oh,
wrong
okay.
button. So,
Happens to the best of us.
yeah. But I think I would add that if you're overwhelmed with what Cindy you're describing, it's going to be important to not try to chase details that don't make sense, to really bring it back to your own, as Hogan said, your own lived experience and what you care about and what matters in terms of your own health and your family's health and what you breathe. And, those are the compelling things that you fold into it. And we've been sharing and looking at the docket that was all the comments that were in back in 2015 when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission actually did the right thing and kept the linear no threshold in the face of groups that were trying to change it. And so the record, it remains important. It won't go away. So what people say, submit their comments, can matter to other people along the road.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, just to underscore again, I mean, if you are interested in the technical details, you want to roll your sleeves up and get into the proposed rule, that's great. And if that's, too much, that's what we're here for. We are doing that work. Again, not to be a broken record, but protectbetter.org. You can use the QR code on the screen. You can get on our email list. We will be doing this analysis. We will be getting the word out. And really, it's at the end of the day very simple. If you are talking with folks, you want to spread the news in your community. The federal government is planning to increase the amount of radiation that we can all be exposed to. That's that's the one sentence explanation of what's happening. Potentially greatly increase. Connie, I see your hand.
I was just going to mention, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. I believe it was Catherine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that put out a sample press release. I mean, I'm stating the obvious here, but it's going to be important. It's going to be very important to reach out to other groups, even if they're not totally like-minded, but also to the media to get this word out. Because I'm sure that they don't know.
That was actually the official press release for the coalition, and so that went out on Monday just to launch
Yeah,
out there in the media world. But it does contain a lot of links and a lot of really good information for people who want to be able to explain, or if anyone has connections with media, feel free to share that,
yeah. Well,
get
I
it
think
out there.
like here in Ohio, we're gonna, at least up here in Northeast Ohio, I'm gonna try to modify that somewhat, but that was great. So thank you. Thank you. Thank all of you.
Thanks, Connie. So we are at time. I think a few of us may be able to linger a little bit. I see hands from Kathy and Leona, and certainly we want to enjoy having this discussion with you all. But I think being at the hour, I do want to just take a moment first to, if you have to go, thank you all really from the bottom of my heart for taking some time to be here today. Um, and, to end on a hopeful note, it's what I said a moment ago about, what it comes down to is the federal government wants to increase radiation exposures. It's not that simple. There's a second sentence too, which is we can do something about it. It doesn't have to be this way. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Um, Kathy.
Oh, yes, thank you. I wanted to say when the Fukushima accident happened, we on the West Coast were really concerned. Sofas and all kinds of furniture was coming up on our beaches. And I wanted to let you know that miso is one of the things that could protect you from radiation illness, MISO, miso. And I want to say in the last decades that I've been working on this topic, I want everybody to write this down. Bioage.com, BIOAGE.com, and Awakening the Genius Within. Awakening the Genius Within. See the video in the free 38-page e-booklet. Dr. Michael Kariak went in Russia. He now lives in Canada. And 100 lab workers working on 1 million animals developed 4 kinds of microalgae. You can't even see it with the bare eye. They grow it in $500 million bioreactors under Siberia, fed by a volcanic river, not affected by Fukushima, he told me. And this can prevent cancer in 20 species of mammals. So I have been taking it every day since I think 2011, shortly after the Fukushima accident. And his daughters, 2 daughters, when they went to college in Canada, when they left Russia, they were the only ones that didn't get the flu during the regular flu season. And the thyroid children in Chernobyl, when they had the thyroid illness and goiters, his children were eating the algae paste. Now it's a very small green vegetarian capsule, and you should take number 3 instead of the less expensive formulas 1 and 2 to prevent cancer. Anyway, my mom and dad had cancer, and I've had no cancer, so I want to share that with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Certainly glad to hear you haven't come down with cancer. And yeah, just to emphasize, whatever measures one may take to ameliorate the harms of radiation exposure, what we really want to be doing is creating a situation where people don't need to face those kinds of considerations, and where on the system level we have regulators who are preventing the exposure in the first place. And miso soup, again, regardless, its health benefits is just delicious. So second Kathy's call for everyone to go eat some miso tonight. Leona?
Hi, thank you. Thanks everyone is staying till the end. Just a quick question because I noticed that we're at the beginning of some big change, and most likely this will happen and the regulations will be less protective, and workers often, I don't assume all workers are pro-nuclear. I mean, some folks just need a job, and that's the reality. But the industry is really good at propaganda. I know there's groups like Generation Justice and others that put out a lot of memes or graphics. I know everybody here has probably seen the banana graphic that bananas put out more radiation than some nuclear facilities, things like that, and how safe it is, or basically misinformation that workers may never challenge because it's their employer or their boss. They're not going to cause a fuss if they want to keep their job. So in Europe, some friends that were doing anti-nuke work, they produced a bunch of materials specifically for women working near radioactive sites to explain a lot of health stuff. And I'm wondering if y'all would work on this moving forward, assuming things are going to go badly. Would you be producing information specifically targeting workers? I'm coming from uranium country, and then one of the big issues I know is transport. And last year there was a uranium truck driver that got really sick. They take radiation readings outside around the truck or the cab, or I don't know the technical term for the trailer, but they don't take radiation readings inside the cab where the driver is sitting. Arguably, I think he's getting the biggest dose, and I don't know what the shielding is between him and the uranium. They say it wasn't radiation sickness. Whatever the case, I'm just using this example because as these facilities are moving forward, and if mining starts to happen more and more, I'm just wondering what kind of information we can give workers, especially if they're friendly to be educated as opposed to just taking the propaganda from the industry. Thanks.
Well,
So are you guys going to produce more info, basically?
thanks for that great question, Leona. Yeah, I mean, I guess again, I'll take it, and if others want to chime in, yes, broadly speaking, absolutely, we want to talk to workers. As I was hearing you speak, I was reminded of how some of the most effective, compelling voices historically for peace have been soldiers. There are definitely nuclear facility workers out there who have seen firsthand some of the risks that they face, and I'm sure you, in particular, Leona, have your plate already very full. But I guess as I'm hearing you speak, I'm wanted to convene a little meeting to kind of hone some of what those talking points and outreach materials might be. So great. Glad to see that. Sounds good. And I guess just the last point I would make a quick plug when you're talking about the pro-nuclear propaganda out there. Yeah, Committee to Bridge the Gap is going to have a report coming out just in the next month or so, exposing the conflicts of interest and nuclear industry ties behind most of the major groups promoting nuclear energy. So hopefully that'll be a resource for us all. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to say to Leona's question about workers?
Okay,
I wish Cindy was.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say, I wish Cindy was still here because I think she could probably speak to this better than I will, Leona. But I'm pretty sure David Richardson, who is at UC Irvine, is also working on this, and especially impacts on workers. So he would be another good person for us to bring into this conversation as an epidemiologist and scientist who can speak to the impacts directly.
Yeah, David Richardson is, I think, one of the lead researchers on the INWORKS study that we mentioned earlier, the international study of workers in nuclear facilities, which is kind of an ever evolving study. They're constantly gathering more data, putting out fresh analyses of the data, and finding with greater sensitivity of their analysis, that indeed the radiation causes health harms at even lower doses than were understood before. I see a question from Joshua Osborne in the chat. And Joshua, if I'm not mistaken, you have some history with Bridge the Gap. Um, I hope I'm not misremembering that. Do you want to? I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to just speak to your question, uh, unmute, or I can answer based on what you've written as well. Um, well, certainly glad to have you here today. Other forms of power generation. No problem. Well, as you're closing those windows, maybe I'll just make some initial remarks, which is that, yeah, tonight's webinar, the Protect Better campaign, the coalition really is focused on radiation per se. We're, you know, even for advocates of nuclear energy, which you will not be surprised to hear many of us on this webinar are not advocates of nuclear energy, but even if you favor nuclear energy, I think it's clear that we don't want a more radioactive environment. So in terms of nuclear energy itself, yeah, that's a whole discussion. Happy to have it. But I do see a couple other folks have raised hands.
Yeah, Hoken, thank you. Joshua, be in touch with Heal Utah. We are working with that and on that. And we like to highlight that, other forms of generation, nuclear is not the answer that we need today. It's still decades out, if then. Some of the fuels aren't even available. A lot of things are still in prototype or paper designs, test reactor phase. Um, so be in touch with Heal Utah. We are working on the nuclear energy industry and revival. And we have dropped a link of kind of our responses of, nuclear is extremely expensive and comes with financial risks, slow timelines, long-term waste management, and what we're here today, the increased public health risks. So be in touch. We'd love to connect about that.
Yeah.
I would just add that even though other forms of energy may seem like just at this point, because they're considered to be not carbon based or whatever, not contributing to that aspect, remember this, the silent killer. Can't smell it, can't taste it, can't see it, but it's actually risking you and your family. And if your fetuses, genetic issues that come up, it's a time bomb. And so it's easy to say, look at that nuclear power plant. It's very, it's operating and we can't see the harm, but the harms are not obvious, but they are there. And over time, you have no idea when that is going to be triggered in terms of your public health or your family's public health or your child's public health. So, those, that would just be my answer on it for what it's worth.
Yeah. Just to add a couple other thoughts to that particular question, is the nuclear fuel cycle, the mining of uranium, milling, enrichment, fuel fabrication, all of that is it's a dirty process that our country is struggling still with. Uranium mine tailings. A lot of people haven't heard of the Church Rock uranium spill, one of the country's worst environmental disasters ever. And the second thing I would just say is that the notion that that nuclear energy is less destructive or harmful in the immediate term hinges on, among other things, a presumption that these facilities won't have catastrophic accidents, which none of us here can predict the future. We certainly don't want to, be excessive scaremongers or anything like that. But on the other hand, this is one of the most consequential ways of producing energy possible. You know, uh, Humans are fallible. Human error rears its head even in the midst of the best engineering. And when you have human fallibility at a solar farm or a wind farm or a battery plant, the consequences are not nearly as horrific as those consequences at a nuclear reactor. Um, so we are just about 15 minutes past the hour. I am gonna need to head out, and our East Coast folks probably even more so.
Yeah, our East Coast folks, thank you for bearing with us. My dog is coming after me, ready for some dinner. So please drop in any additional questions and reach out to the protectbetter.org website. You can submit questions, have those comments, and be in touch. Heal Utah's hosting another webinar on the 15th. So if you have more questions, join us then. And I'm sure we all, as this group, will be hosting more events as we continue working our way through that nice big revision of all the rule changes with the NRC. So for those that are still with us and to our amazing speakers, thank you all so much.
Can I just say one thing? I've been working on this since 1975. Back then, if the United States had built all the planned nuclear power plants that were on the drawing board, they would have used all the fresh water in the USA with none left over for agriculture. Thank you for listening to that.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and
Thanks
thank you
so
for your
much,
decades of work.
everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good
This has
Thank you,
night.
been great.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
We'll reach out with the links and recordings and all that. So thank you so much.
Take good care.